So welcome everybody. For those of you I don't know, I'm Brad Gentry, one of the directors of the Center for Business and the Environment at Yale. And I'm thrilled to be here talking with Kathy Loftus from Whole Foods. And we'll have some time for all of you to speak with Kathy as well later. This is the second in this year's series of the Sustainability Leaders Talks. Kathy's going to talk to us today about how Whole Foods weaves its green mission into everything that it does and how this has helped it become the nation's leading green food retailer. Kathy's role at Whole Foods is to coordinate sustainability programs, including the overall company impact reporting, as well as engineering, energy management, maintenance, green building, and strategic energy procurement. And she's been doing this for the last 6 years. She comes to this position with a BS in mechanical engineering from Worcester Polytechnic Institute, as well as work as the director of business development for a startup energy technology firm, an electric utility company, and 8 years at Shaw Supermarkets as director of energy and environmental management. As if this wasn't enough, she's also involved in a huge array of activities in the community and the state and nationally, including the Energy Efficiency Action Network of Massachusetts, their Utility Motivation Working Group, being an advisor for the grocery sector of the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED program, on her town's Renewable Energy Commission, and chair of a wonderful not-for-profit Clean Air, Cool Planet. So, delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you, Brad.
And, sort of let's get started with the question on the poster. You all are considered the leading green grocery retailer in the U.S. What sets you apart? How'd you get there?
Well, I have to say it's our team members, and we're so fortunate because we do attract the best, the brightest, the most passionate, and it goes way back to 1980 with the first store that opened. Everybody who works at Whole Foods Market becomes part of this family and really just has this as their DNA and their ethos. And we don't have a top-down approach. We're very decentralized, kind of tribes, if you will. But I found, and I'm new. I'm six years into this. So I'm privileged to actually go to work for a company that had the values that I did, and that's really what drew me to it. But it's people like Lee and all of you that are here today that give me my inspiration. I really think that's what sets us apart. It's kind of an inside-out approach that we have, and then maybe outside-in. But everybody's really passionate and brings some expertise to the table, and they're vocal, and they do talk about what is important to them, and we all meet. It's very consensus-based. We don't have one department that does sustainability. We don't have one chief sustainability officer. We have people that work on Green Mission voluntarily, and we have people that do Green Mission as part of every part of their work. So we can talk more about that as we go on, but it really is woven into everything that we do.
So speaking of being woven into everything that you do, sustainability usually very much depends upon the business case. Why is it in the company's best interest to do so? What's the position that you and your whole Green Mission reps and other Whole Foods employees take in making the business case, and how does that manifest itself?
Well, a lot of times I think it comes from understanding what the real impacts are. And so it's easy sort of now to make a business case around energy, and as we saw today around water. There may be some less tangible ways to develop and identify a business case for other things that we do, Green Mission. But I think the great thing is that if we start small, and we usually typically start with a pilot, and if 1 or 2 stores or 1 or 2 regions adopt something, then it's easy to make that bigger business case and spread it out. But people will come up with some packaging ideas, for example, and for ideas with anything related to what we do business-wise, and they will just try to look for what are some of the impacts, not just economically, but socially and environmentally. Because we have this stakeholder approach. Whole Foods Market uses, we live by our core values. We have a declaration of interdependence, but we truly believe in the fully stakeholder model. And by looking at what some of those impacts might be socially and environmentally, that we can somehow add to a case. For us to maintain our leadership in Green Mission, it's tough to put a price tag on some of those kinds of things that we do, but if we feel that we want to have the best people working at our stores because they're our front people working with customers and need to be knowledgeable and educated and passionate about what they do, then we want to maintain our leadership for those reasons, among many others.
So can you give you just mentioned the stakeholder approach. Can you give an example of that in action?
Yes, absolutely. So Lee Kane is here and he works in local and foraging. Some of the things that we do is we'll work with folks that might know a little bit more about agricultural things. For example, I mean, nobody probably knows more about some of our organics than Errol, who's here, and some others. But if there's something that we may not be aware of, and we have a criticism, for example, from somebody, we'll try to strike a dialogue with that person and learn and understand what's at stake, and then invite some programs to happen as a result of that. So many of you may remember when Michael Pollan wrote The Omnivore's Dilemma, there was some criticism about big organic food, and we learned from that, and we went out and we developed the local producer loan program. So we work with local farmers and local producers, try to get small startup companies out there and available for us, and a lot of that helps us on the supply chain and also helps environmentally and some other, it's great business, so it's a good economic model as well.
So let me follow up on the local food part there for a second. Yale Dining is trying to source more of its produce, vegetables, meats locally, but there's all sorts of problems with both local processing and local distribution. And I know that you can't be on top of everything that's happening, but what's your sense about how those sort of limits on the system, if you will, are affecting your ability to do more in the local food area?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely going to field this out to Errol and Lee too, but just very briefly, I think there are some opportunities again to work with local producers and distribution companies that might be sort of out of the norm. So one of the things that we try to do is we're all about innovation and creativity. So how can we kind of bring together different sources than we normally would have thought of otherwise? And Lee, for example, had work with someone who came out of the IT industry who started working with a co-op and bringing together a whole lot of different producers locally, and then would have a distribution system as a result of that. So I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit, Lee, and then we'll go to Errol.
Do we need a mic?
Microphone? Yes, we do. Sorry.
I think it's coming from this side. Behind you.
To keep it brief, because I think we'll try to get into this some in the question and answer period as well, but specifically to the point that Kathy just raised, a lot of the challenges that we've experienced are, there are parts of the system out there and substantial parts of the system, but they're not connected, at least in the local food scene. So really connecting the dots is a big challenge that we've been trying to focus on. We've worked with a number of small local distributors who are actually specializing in trying to get products to our markets, not necessarily working within the traditional distribution systems, and also trying to keep as much of the money in the pockets of the growers and producers as they possibly can. So there's a kind of a different set of values going along with this as well. It's kind of in its infancy stage. That's one of the things that we're seeing is that there's a lot more willingness to go places people haven't been willing to go before because the economics didn't always work. But our feeling is longer term that they will pan out for them. Errol, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that at all now. Okay, so we can come back to that.
Thank you for that. It's interesting on the Yale Dining side, for example, and we'll probably hear more about this as lunch or later on the panel, an effort to bring institutional buyers together to sort of pool resources. You all as a retailer rather than a wholesaler, might be an interesting collaborator in some of those efforts. So anyhow, exciting. So we're talking about innovation and creativity, and you talked a lot about hiring wonderful people who share your values and decentralized organization, leaving them free to do what they want. I assume that's the source of a lot of innovation and creativity. Are there any other steps that the company takes to try to be as innovative and creative as possible?
Yes, absolutely, and you just touched upon it when you said unlikely alliances and things like that. We have limited resources. We're a big name company, but we're a small company when you think about the number of team members that work maybe in the support functions. So typically what I try to do is maybe work with other retailers, work with other industries to find out how have they made some inroads, looking at not necessarily even trying to invent the best next thing for food retail or food production or any other area of our business, but how can we take existing technologies and use them differently? So new applications for certain things, similar like the fuel cell or some of the other technological advances we've made within the industry. We look to the National Renewable Energy Labs, some of the labs out there. I think we need to do more partnering with academia, and we've done that with my alma mater. They'll be doing some studies for us, and I did it in a previous job with another institution on a marketing study. You know, would consumers really drive a little bit further to go to a green supermarket? So I think it's really availing ourselves of all of the different key players in our industry, in other industries, in government and academia that we can all collaborate together.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the consumer evaluation and would they drive further. Can you talk a little bit about how you measure or how you get a sense for what parts of the green mission or the mission as a whole or future missions customers are most interested in and how they value that?
Sure, absolutely. I think we tend to do a really good job in our social media efforts, and we've got a lot of blogging going on and a lot of Facebook pages for each store, tweeting. But we also have on our website a customer response section. So we do see a lot of customer responses, and we published our first Green Mission report this year that I just love to talk about because it isn't truly a corporate social responsibility report, and those are seemingly a little bit more reactive, where we believe in the conscious capitalism and conscious business models, where when you think about all of these things as integrated and woven through your business practices, and you sort of have that in your DNA, it's always going to be proactive and not reactive. But we never really did a great job of telling all the stories that about all the things that we do. So Whole Planet Foundation, for example, Whole Kids Foundation, the Local Producer Loan Program, Animal Compassion, so many different things that when we're more profitable and truly sustainable as a business, we can continue to do those good things and support those foundations. I think that hearing from our customers, as we did as a result of this Green Mission report being published, we were floored. We knew before that our customers were interested because they would write in and they would respond to blogs. One Earth Month, we had a live blog, live podcast, if you will, and we had so many different people from around the country coming in and talking about what they would do, for example, for natural cleaning products, what they do at home. So I think it's the sharing. Our customers tend to be pretty vocal, and they have no problem telling us when they think, you know, we should be doing things differently or improve things with respect to energy usage and other things like that. But we know our customers care about the things that they put into their mouths, and they know that healthy eating is important, for example, because they're visiting our wellness clubs and they talk about that kind of offering. You know, they want to see BPA removed from plastics. They really support our eliminating plastic bags at the checkout. So there's a lot of that we not only see and hear in the stores directly, but then get for feedback.
So as you think about customer feedback and whatnot, do you see large geographic variations? And you know, how do you respond to that? And are there areas of commonality as well across?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I would definitely say that on the West Coast and East Coast, and traditionally this is probably because maybe there is a little bit more concentrated university, and people understanding maybe what's at stake because they're at the end of the pipeline, so to speak, for energy and water and things like that. So there's been a little bit more focus in the news on environmental impacts, and as Mike mentioned, grid instability, you know, the power outage. I think Steve mentioned that as well. But there's you know, a little bit maybe more awareness in certain regions of the country. But we will go and visit with, say, the South region, which you traditionally wouldn't, you know, those folks might not have known so much. And then after Hurricane Katrina, with the power and all of the other things, when we go out and talk in the community, we kind of bring with us what we've experienced in other areas and start talking about it. And now we're seeing that I think there's, you know, more of a movement toward commonality than just, you know, it's only happening in certain areas.
Yeah. So that comparison across areas, and you mentioned also, earlier your decentralized structure. I assume best practices sharing across multiple locations is a big deal, and that's not easy to do. You talk a little bit about some of the successes you've had and techniques you've used well for that, and some of the failures or some of the areas that are proving to be harder for you in that regard.
Absolutely. And before I forget, I'm actually going to give a shout out to Alan from Brighton, because right before our session, Alan suggested, is there a way that we can do some group discussion so that we can talk more and share what's going on between us in the Green Mission Group? And we had talked about this in the past. We have what we call Whole Foods Market University, and we have worked with them in IT to develop a platform where folks could share energy tips and best practices. But I'm thinking, and I told Alan this, we should probably develop some kind of a LinkedIn group or something where it's password protected, it's for this group, but everybody can get online and just share their tips and share their ideas, pick up the phone obviously too. But I think, so that's one great thing, and that's something that we know we need to improve on. What we've been able to do in the past well, I think, in terms of sharing best practices, and I'll specifically liken this to construction and new development and engineering. We may have had a couple of regions of the country that were a little bit more interested in building LEED. They thought their customers might recognize that label and enjoy that, or Energy Star equipment, things like that. So we worked closely with them, developed some models, had some great successes, and brought that to our monthly store development calls and our 2 or 3 times a year that we meet in person, and brought some of those case studies using PowerPoint, using store tours wherever we can. We'll bring the folks to the place that we're going. One thing that I think we could do better, and it's absolutely not a failure, but it's room for improvement. We worked with the DOE. We worked with the National Renewable Energy Labs to design a new store that would hopefully use 50% less energy than what was approved by code at the time. Because we had some other things going on in that store, we have some other environmental challenges with refrigerant gases. We also had that kind of a balancing effect of using the least amount of energy that we could, but also trying to be proactive in reducing our refrigerant charge and trying something a little different on the state-of-the-art refrigeration side. So while that uses a little bit more energy, it really helps carbon footprint, greenhouse gas emission footprint, when you reduce your refrigerant charge and potential leaks. So this store, North Raleigh, North Carolina, achieved a 41% approximately lower energy consumption, or modeled lower energy consumption. What we learned, we shared, but it was more in this PowerPoint scenario, and it was kind of getting adoption from other regions, but not really strongly, until we had one region, and we brought Mike Gouldenstern on board, and he's a key player there because people trust him as an independent expert. But we sat and had a call with their outside engineers and went through line by line and really showed how to make this replicable and how to adopt this practice. And so now we've got a few stores that will be designed that way or very similarly. So I think the challenge is not necessarily standing up and lecturing about what seemed to work, but it's showing everybody the stores. It's getting rolling your sleeves up and looking at the drawings and getting into the nitty-gritty. That helps.
You sort of think about social communication, social networking, use of avatars or sort of remote tours and things like that. Maybe there's some.
That's a great idea. Is anybody taking notes? We can use that. That's a great idea.
We'll open it up for questions in a little while, but if people have other thoughts on ways to address some of the challenges, I'm sure that would be a great part of today's conversation. But speaking of challenges, as you look forward, both on the sort of sustainability side as well as on the economic and environmental parts more directly, what are the big challenges that you all are facing, and how are you thinking about addressing them?
I think we all know some of the major challenges, and agriculturally, I mean, we're talking about a loss of arable soil and erosion of some of that, and the water impacts. Hugely concerned about the use of pesticides and fungicides and herbicides and how that's impacting our food supply, and just agriculture, I guess, in general, and health impacts. So some of those challenges are we don't want to preach to our customers. We want to sort of lead by example and show the results of living a healthy lifestyle and choosing certain products over others. But a challenge is, as somebody mentioned, the bottled water. You know, can we just take those all off of our shelves right now? No, not really, because our customers want those. But the challenge is, how do we educate while not, you know, kind of lecturing, and also maybe providing as much information as we can. I think it's all about transparency, and we talk about the nutrition labels on products. Maybe we need a little bit more information about other aspects of how things are grown. And that's a challenge because, you know, folks are in the grocery store to pick up their food and other products, and there's not a lot of mind share going on about other things in the store. So that's where we need to use the social media, as you suggested, and maybe the gathering spaces in the stores. That's one nice thing that we have for our customers. So, you know, maybe there's some education points and some ways to use the stores that way too.
So you mentioned quite a range of scales and time, you know, from loss of arable land to nutrition labeling and whatnot. I'm assuming that most of the work that you all do is much more directed to, so how do we relate to customers today or next week or something like that? Arable land loss, or, you know, where's the food going to come from, or will there be water for the food? It's obviously a much longer term question. How does that come into your, how does that sort of translate into your business case and your business activities?
It's a great question, and we're kind of wrestling with that a little bit right now, and I might let Errol speak to that in a minute too. But one of the things that we do try to do, again, is collaborate and have our finger on the pulse of everything related to what we do out there. And so we will hear of, for example, pilot programs going on with maybe other institutions or other industries like us. We've had Resolve come to us. They're a sort of quasi-public agency on the mediation side almost, but there are ways that we might be able to get involved that can help. We don't have to spend a ton of time because we don't have all those resources, but we can get involved, understand what they're doing, making sure that it aligns with us, and then help advocate what we learn out to our customers. Mm-hmm. So there are some things that we try to get involved in that aren't, you know, full-time efforts, if you will, but really we need to be involved and to be a part of that message. We also support the Expo East and West, and we bring together suppliers for packaging reduction and new packaging ideas and things like that. But Errol, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that now, or just some of the things that we might be doing that are kind of on the side, if you will, with these.
Up to you. Can you just wait for a quick sec?
Hi, sorry about that. All the sustainability efforts on a procurement side are front and center for us. It's what we do, it's who we are, it's what our customers buy, and anytime we do anything that you know, sort of speaks to our customers' values, our sales are better. I mean, it's really part of our DNA. It's kind of why I know I work at Whole Foods Market. I wouldn't if it weren't like that. And, you know, just a couple examples is that we sell $1.5 billion worth of organic foods just in grocery, the center store. So it's bigger than a lot of retailers overall. You know, we're America's largest non-GMO verified retailer. We have over 5,000 items that are 99.1% free of GMOs. We sell more fair trade products. So these are things that are core to our business model, and when we do them well, we do well. So we can get more to it later.
Absolutely, thank you. That's great.
One of the sort of geeky questions that comes up around that is, you know, is big organic an oxymoron? Can you have a continuation of the highly energy intensive, you know, highly land intensive, somewhat vulnerable cropping system, and where does more resilient local food systems fit? You know, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but do you see that as an issue for you all down the road? You know, even maybe shifting a significant part to the locally produced?
Yes, absolutely. I think that and we can liken it to energy too, but significant through the local producer loan program and other support mechanisms for local farming, and just the education that we provide out there. We do see a lot moving toward local I don't have the statistics and can't tell you exactly how we might make some of those switches. There are still some efficiencies for certain ways, to be centralized. But I think when we look at energy, it's very similar. We're trying to bring more and more on-site or local, and not necessarily using some of the centralized resource models out there. So I think it's like everything almost, we're going to have a balanced portfolio of all of that and really start to, and just learn and understand more of all of the impacts as we go, so that we make the right choices in the percent local and percent centralized. Speaking
of portfolio, you've had quite a varied career so far: mechanical engineering, energy, now food. Can you talk a little bit about that path, and for people who want to work in sustainability or particularly sustainable food systems, and how you might go about advising them or suggesting approaches?
And it is a very interesting and strange journey that I've had. I wanted to be an English teacher, and my parents especially, you'll never get a job. This was back when, they weren't hiring teachers, and for whatever reason, I was blessed with kind of a balanced left brain, right brain. I'm not saying it was excellent in both, but as a balance. So I thought, okay, well, what do I have for choices in the math and sciences? How about engineering? People said engineering is a great industry to get into. You'll definitely find a job when you graduate. Well, the only jobs available at that time were really in the defense industry, and I didn't want to build bombs. But I found a small, mechanical, electrical, plumbing consulting firm that was hiring, so I figured, why not? And just another aside too, is as much as I wanted to be an English teacher, everyone in my family is, well, a lot of people in my family, all the women anyway, are nurses, and I was the only female that could not stand the sight of blood or want to do anything with respect to medical. So I remember thinking, if I become an engineer, I can design prosthetics, and then I'm sort of doing good. I'm not going to cure cancer, but I can do something good. Well, I quickly got into electrical engineering and biomedical engineering and thought, ooh, this is much harder than I thought it was going to be. So I switched to mechanical, much more, for me anyway, easily understood. It's very visible. But again, coming out of college without many prospects and finding this small mechanical, electrical, plumbing company and getting involved and working with them and seeing what was going on with the building industry, I remember hanging in there for about a year and a half, and I thought, I can't do this. We're doing such a disservice. I mean, this is back before CAD and back before computers. We were hand drafting systems, and we were in the bottom of the, talk about trickle down, so the developer, building owner, architect, by the time it gets to the MEP, the margins, they're making very little money. Everything was cut and paste from this project, just use this design and add a safety factor to everything. So again, like I said, after about a year of this, I thought, I just can't do this anymore. We're going to cause the tenant to spend way too much money. They're going to be using way more electricity or gas than they need to, and I wasn't happy. So I went to talk to one architect and one development company, and I said, how interested would you be in looking at a matrix of different options that take life cycle costs into consideration? And believe it or not, they were really interested and all over it, and they didn't always pick the best life cycle cost option, but they weren't only thinking cheap from that on out. They were thinking of some of the other impacts. And this is post-energy crisis of the 70s, but this is pre, some of the market manipulation that went on with Enron and some of the other energy major problems, pricing after Hurricane Katrina. So I consider that a huge coup, and it was a great win. And then right after that, there was an energy engineering position that opened up, and I went to work for the small company in Boston, where I learned from their two VPs who were amazing, because they basically gave me enough rope, but they said, we'll be here if you need anything, but you're going to be the front person working with the Mass Rhode Island DEPs, a lot of the big utility companies, and small to big manufacturers. So I worked for New England Medical Center, designing a new heating and air conditioning system for them, but all kinds of exposure and great learning. And from there, went to the electric utility company, where I designed and developed their conservation and load management programs for all of their commercial industrial customers. But when I say I mean me and a whole lot of other people, because even though I have this balance of left brain, right brain, and I've had a good foundation in my education and some great people that have taught me. I don't know, I know this much. I align myself with the experts because I just know that there's so much more to be gained by collaborating and always finding the yin to your yang. Another thing I know about myself is I like to think big and I like to get things done, but I don't necessarily like the minutia and the details. And so if you can find somebody who likes that part of it, who might not be as much of a talker, then those things will yin and yang out. But so working for the electric utility company was again a great background because I learned very big business, systemic, how things were working. I also started to understand what was going on in the resource planning side of energy. And we were learning about acid rain. And even though I morphed from my role in the electric company to designing and implementing conservation and load management programs to being a key account person, because the electric utility industry was deregulating, they wanted 6 people to manage the biggest accounts for this utility. And because I was the only mechanical engineer, they put me in front of food. They said, anything that has refrigeration, compressors, mechanical, you're going to handle. Okay. But what I learned is these businesses wanted to share what some of their challenges were, and how could we make them more profitable? How could we understand their load? How could we help them benchmark against each other in other industries? And I quickly, lots of rate information, load information, used all of that to help these customers. One of my customers was Shaw's Supermarkets. They were needing an energy and regulatory affairs person, so I applied for the job and I got that job. That's where I met Mike. So I took my electric utility background and said, you know what, we're never going to know how a store is using energy with a whole house utility bill that comes 30 days later. We need to kind of be more forensic, and we need to get in there and do some sub-metering and really understand how and when we're using energy. Also, the stores don't want to see the maintenance folks. It's unfortunate, but they think it's going to cost them money. So they say, you know what, just if I said to the maintenance person for a few stores, we're using 1% more energy, can you go figure out what it is? They would laugh me out of the room. So Mike and I and a few others, again, this whole collaboration approach, we brainstormed with our refrigeration people, our electrical people, some outside vendors, the utilities, and we said, if we implement this system, and we didn't even have a budget for it at the time, what do we think we can gain from it? And how can we influence people out there to help us with it? So we showed them the business case. We were going to spend $2 million. We were going to hopefully save $1 million. And we're going to get all of our stores equipped with this monitoring system with exception-based reporting for a holistic feedback loop. And we did some control groups and pilots along the way. But we actually were able to get a couple of utilities to pay 100% for the system. So our $2 million investment with a $1 million savings quickly became, much lower investment, much higher return on investment. So we got this program in place, and Mike and I started looking at, well, the manufacturer of this refrigerated case recommends that we operate it at this, these conditions, or some other way of looking at lighting, for example. Do we really need to do that, or can we test something? Some of our HVAC systems, how can we operate them more efficiently? So we use this system to kind of push the boundaries, measure the savings, and start to do things in the industry that were unheard of before. Again, using existing technology, but just different applications of it. And that, when I went to work, well, when I was at Shaw's, and I sort of took over for my boss on Food Marketing Institute's Energy and Technical Services Committee, we brought all kinds of industry experts together, and once a year we had a big energy and technical services meeting, and we would share things. And because we had this sub-metering program, and because we were able to prove to the utilities what we had for load, and when we had the Yankee nuclear systems go down, the Connecticut Yankee systems go down, I don't know if you remember that, but back in the 90s, they were looking for ways, new dirty sources of cheap peak power that they can, jet engines basically, to inject into the grid, or customers like us to shed load. So we had the systems, we shed the load, benefited greatly economically from those, and we're able to share that out to the industry so that when there was that massive gas pipeline, we don't know exactly what happened, but Enron was around at the time, and gas prices went up to here, and there were some blackouts out in California, because they had heard what we did at Shaw's, They all started doing that, and eventually demand response was born. So now there are some programs out there that other industries are taking advantage of too, in either building on-site generation, that's a way to be available to the utilities, or just shedding load. And we talked about a whole lot of things like that moving forward. And so working for Shaw's was great. Shaw's got bought by a bigger company, and this bigger company at the time thought they could handle everything from Idaho, which is where they were based, so they let me go on my way. And it was probably good timing because I had been there for 8 years, and I think I was at this point in my life where I needed to try something new. And I'd never sold before, never done business development, but this small startup company in the demand response industry, as it happens, asked me to come join their team. So I worked with them for a couple of years, and again got probably the background I needed to move to Whole Foods Market, because I was selling directly as a result, and I had never sold before. And coming to Whole Foods, when the position opened up at Whole Foods, I had been watching them since my days at Shaw's, wanting to work for this company because it was such an incredible company. Again, my values aligned with them. After all my experiences with big corporate greed and Enron and the debacle there and everything else, I thought, I am so excited to go to work for a company like Whole Foods. And when I got there, I quickly realized I'm one person and we're so decentralized, I can't get, although my ideas might sound good and they might be something that we should be doing, I can't get that done necessarily easily. That's where I think having the sales background helped. So consultative selling, aligning myself with other experts and champions, I think helped me get a lot of what we see today out in our stores and this $10 million capital budget that's providing us, hopefully, 25% energy reduction by 2015, which not only results in hundreds of millions of kilowatt hours that don't get used, it hopefully helps put off building major power plants. And it helps us be much more profitable so that, again, holistically, we can come back to supporting Whole Planet Foundation, supporting all the other foundations that we have out there, and being a viable member of the community.
So you've got selling more stuff, you've got building your brand, reducing your costs, all through sustainability. Not a bad story. We have some time for questions. If folks have, if the mics could be available, and if folks could speak only when they have a mic, and quickly state their name and their affiliation. So I've got a question.
Hi, I'm Nick from the Woburn store. One quick thing I wanted to interject with about the freedom comment of innovation. One of the reasons we are so viable is because we have a culture of empowerment at Whole Foods, and that's really great. And on a more of an internal matter about communication, getting a LinkedIn thing, we have SharePoint, and that is a really excellent tool, and we could just use that one more instead of developing a new one. I'm all for that, but.
Excellent. No, that's a great point, and I forgot about SharePoint, so thank you for saying that. And just so you're aware, I wrote myself a note to follow up on it with the experts, because I'm not the expert in that area, but you're absolutely right. It's using Grapevine and our existing communication, maybe just tweaking it for this group. Thank you.
Come in here.
With Whole Foods, and back to your question earlier, Brad, about how do we distill best practices throughout the company. I just want to say that there's one aspect of our company that most people from the outside don't really understand or appreciate, and that's we're ferociously competitive. If you think we're competitive with Trader Joe's, you should see what we do internally. So, these ideas that come along, we usually want to pick one store or one region to try new technology, new practices, whatever it happens to be. As soon as that looks like it's going to work, or it looks like it's going to get some good media attention, the operations people are falling all over each other to be the next to do it. So it happens pretty much, and Kim might want to add to this as one of our operations people, but our stores compete with each other, our departments compete against each other, our regions compete against each other. I mean, it's really a phenomenal part of our culture that, again, most people from the outside wouldn't really understand or necessarily see on a day-to-day basis. Kim, do you want to say anything?
Can I just ask you a follow-up question? Sometimes competition gets in the way of sharing. How do you all have the two pair together?
That's an excellent question. And so the first part of it is whoever it is wants to be first to do it. We were the first in Glastonbury, Connecticut, to put a fuel cell into our store. First supermarket in the world, Kathy, correct? To have a fuel cell. So, you know, Glastonbury was very happy to be the first to do that, and then quickly share that, win with the rest of the stores and with the rest of the region. So that's kind of, you know, we always want to be first. When we were talking to the UTC who made the fuel cell, we said, you know, the only thing we want you to understand is we want to be the first supermarket to have a fuel cell, and then after that we want everybody to have it, but we want to be first.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Over here.
Matt from White Plains. I just wanted to share some ideas and best practices. When I was working for Guitar Center, we had basically a social network called Gain Central, where employees could upload their songs and talk about, you know, whatever they wanted to talk about. So I thought that was interesting and related to the idea. I mean, he mentioned SharePoint, which is great, but if we could add a social media aspect to that, where, you know, I go on my computer and I can log in at home, check on Facebook, check on Whole Foods, social media. You know, I'll definitely be more in the network if we could access it from home. And also, you mentioned educating without preaching. I think a best practice we have in White Plains is every few weeks we'll show a movie, an educational documentary like Vanishing of the Bees or Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. Some of those great documentaries that, you know, are right in line with our core values. So
Great.
thank you.
Thank you. That's great.
Hi, I'm Joel from Paramus, and I had a question about the comment that when customer values are addressed and sales are better, and that this pertains to where can we see the Green Mission report, customer report, that had such positive feedback for us? Is that on SharePoint? And the reason why I ask that, because sometimes decisions in a department may be made based on cost, immediate cost, and not looking at the long-range picture.
Yeah.
For instance, I asked a question last week why we're using certain types of containers instead of the containers that are better for the environment, and we're using the old brown containers, let's say. And they said, well, it's basically a cost issue.
Yep, and we know that there's still a little way to go in some areas with sharing best practices and sharing information and looking at long-term life cycle costs. But, you know, I think to your first question, the Green Mission report is on the Whole Foods Market website, but I believe there's also a location on the Green Mission SharePoint. But we can get you that. And, you know, after the meeting, I'm sure we'll have some notes and we'll have a way to let everybody know what we're talking about and where it is. And with respect to some of those, you know, sort of container and other, even smallware equipment, things like that, what we're doing is we're now centrally working with the regional equipment buyers and some of the regional Green Mission specialists too, to share this information on, okay, this might cost a little bit more, but here are the longer term benefits, and getting more specifications, if you will, that would be not standards, but again, getting the information out so that we are making those decisions appropriately. And Lee, I don't know if you want to add to that at all. Okay, yeah, but that's basically.
Maybe you have time for one more in the back there, maybe, or do you have sorry, John.
Hi, my name is John Wargo. I'm a professor of environmental health and politics here. This term, I've launched a new graduate research seminar on the future of food. And one of the recurring questions that comes up in the seminar is how to deal with the complexity of all of the environmental and energy and health issues that surround foods. How to deal with the complexity in a way that could really educate and empower consumers to practice more responsible purchasing. So I'm wondering your thoughts about this, and you know, the topics that come up are they're pesticides, but also plastics, energy questions, after Fukushima, radionuclides in fish, so that there are many different concerns and challenges that my students are worried about, and I imagine most other people are. That many people feel like they need to have a really good night's sleep before they walk into a supermarket and face the different claims that are being made, and nobody really knows which claim to believe. So I'm wondering what you think the role or the responsibility of a corporation like yours might be to try to help educate the consumer. And I'm especially interested, as are some of my students, in the potential for scanning technology to possibly be a vehicle to cut through some of the highly complex knowledge.
Did you just say scanning technology?
Scanning technologies.
Yeah. Well, here's where, again, I'll probably have a limited response and open it up to some of my team members. First of all, I think we are absolutely as concerned and want to be considerate about how we educate our customers. We are doing some of that now through the wellness clubs in some of the stores, and through a lot of, even if we don't have a wellness club in the store, we have a healthy eating section, and we typically will have either a chef or folks available to talk to our customers about what they're eating. As you mentioned, I know there's, in some of the other stores too, we might have showing of documentaries or something that's a little bit third party, so it's not kind of just a Whole Foods branded education piece, if you will. But I think we do want to collaborate more with academia and government where we can, to make sure that this is all happening holistically. Again, there aren't silos, because it's difficult right now. There's a lot of boundaries around specific areas of all those things that you mentioned. And I think we need to start figuring out how to integrate it all. Maybe it's things that we do in business schools and things that we do in graduate studies too. But I hear from people that, I live in the city and I'm a musician and I don't have enough money to spend on organic food, for example. And that's when, we'll try to say, okay, but what are you spending on Advil, or what are you spending on healthcare because you're not active and you're not, so to try to broaden their thinking that it isn't just this one cost. So I think there's more of that needs to get done too, similarly with packaging and bulk versus bulk, and a whole lot of other areas like that I think we need to broaden out. But I don't know if Lee or Errol want to add to that.
We're going to need to wrap soon, so if you do, please, short.
I was just going to say we've got a whole seminar where we can cover all those topics.
Excellent.
So that's the afternoon.
Excellent. Perfect.
Great.
Great segue then.
Well,
Thank you.
I apologize that I'm going to have to cut the questions off because we have a panel coming up in 10 minutes that will continue the conversation on a lot of these topics. I want to thank the GE Foundation for their support for the Sustainability Leaders Lecture Series. I also want to thank our partners at the Yale Office of Sustainability, Yale Sustainable Food Program. And I have to say, just personally, having been involved in a lot of these business programs, I'm not sure I've ever seen one where we've had such a combination of people from the company and people from Yale engaging in conversation together. And so I think that's been tremendously valuable, and I look forward to other opportunities to do that in the future. And I'd ask you all to join me in thanking Kathy very much for her.
Thank you. Thank you, Al.